Hello and welcome to the GCSE Chemistry tutorial for topic C1, Atomic Structure and the Periodic Table. This tutorial will cover atoms, elements and compounds. Starting off with some key words that you'll need to know. An atom, that's the smallest particle of a substance. An element is a substance made up of the same atoms, and elements are found in the periodic table. And a compound is formed when elements chemically combine. Let's look at elements in a bit more detail. So like we said, they are the smallest particle of a substance. They're so small, they're about 1 × 10 to the minus 10 metres small. So you wouldn't be able to see them unless you had a high-powered microscope. And atoms are actually made of smaller subparticles called electrons, neutrons and protons. And you need to know where they are in an atom. So an atom looks like this. An atom has a nucleus, and in the nucleus there are neutrons and protons. It also has shells or orbits which contain electrons. Let's go back to those subparticles. So protons have a mass of 1 and the charge of +1. A neutron has a mass of 1 and has no charge, so they're neutral. Electrons, their mass is very small. We say negligible, which means it's a really small mass, and their charge is -1. Overall, an atom has no charge. And that's because the number of protons in the nucleus is always the same as the number of electrons in the shells. So protons are positive, electrons are negative, and those two numbers are always the same, so it balances each other out, and the atom has no charge. In the periodic table, elements are represented with two numbers, a mass number and an atomic number. The atomic number tells you the number of protons in the nucleus or electrons in the shell. So this example here, sodium, it has 11 electrons in the shell and it has 11 protons in the nucleus. The mass number tells you the number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus, so the weight of the nucleus. And you can use this to figure out the number of neutrons. So in this example, if we know the mass number of sodium is 23, we also know 11 of those 23 are protons, which means the remaining 12 would be neutrons. So the number of neutrons in this case would be 12. Look at the example of sodium and how you can figure out the number of protons, electrons and neutrons of different atoms. Elements are made up of one kind of atom. So say for example oxygen, that is made up of only oxygen atoms. Or lithium. Lithium is made up of only lithium atoms. There's over 100 elements and they're found in this periodic table. And in later tutorials we'll look through the periodic table in more detail. Elements then can combine together to form different compounds. For example, water. Water is not found in the periodic table because water is made of elements. It's made of hydrogen and oxygen. Each atom is represented in the periodic table with a symbol. And each symbol has different atomic numbers and mass numbers, which we'll look at later on in other tutorials. When elements join together, they form compounds, and this happens when they join chemically, and that involves a chemical bond. We'll look at this in another tutorial, but it involves gaining or losing or sharing electrons. When we write compounds, we can use formulae. For example, water is H2O, which means a molecule of water has 2 hydrogen atoms for every 1 oxygen atom. The properties of a compound differ from the original elements it was made from. Say for example we take the compound sodium chloride. Sodium chloride is most commonly called common salt and it's white crystals. But it's actually made from the elements sodium, which is a really reactive grey metal, and chlorine, which is a poisonous, dangerous gas. But when they join to make sodium chloride, they no longer have the properties of the elements came from. They now have new properties because it's a new compound. Some other formulae you need to know, it's carbon dioxide, which is CO2, hydrochloric acid, HCl, calcium chloride, CaCl2, and ammonia, NH3. Notice that when you write the numbers, they're always in the lower case at the bottom. So here's some key questions. If you pause the tutorial and try and answer the question now. What are the 3 subparticles of an atom? Well, there's protons and neutrons, which are in the nucleus, and then electrons in the shells. Why do atoms have no overall charge? This is because they have the same number of positive protons in the nucleus and negative electrons in the shells. How many neutrons does an atom of lithium have? Well, to answer this, you need to know the mass number and the atomic number of lithium, which you can find in the periodic table. You do get given the periodic table in the exam. The atomic number of lithium is 3 and the mass number is 7. So this tells us that it has 3 protons and therefore 3 electrons. The number of neutrons is the mass number minus the atomic number, which would make 4. What does the formula NH3 tell you about this compound? The compound is ammonia and is made of 1 nitrogen atom for every 3 hydrogen atoms. In summary, we've looked at atoms, elements and compounds.